Mr. Chair, we are now streaming online live.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee meeting to order Monday, November 29th, 6 p.m. I'd like to start with recognition that we acknowledge with respect we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, and an honor to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. First, I'd like approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to that effect? Mr. Jansen, Councillor Jansen, don't need a seconder. Any discussion, objections? Going once, going twice, we'll call that approved. Next, approval of the minutes from the Finance and Governance Committee, September 27th, 2021. Councillor Baxter, any discussion, concerns? Any objections? We'll call that approved. Public participation. Do we have anybody for public participation? Okay, new business, service review. We'll turn it over to Jen, if I may. Ms. Hepting, our Chief Financial Officer. What are you, Director of Finance? Okay, so sorry, Jen. You're just Jen.
Jen works just fine. Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Before we get started on the service review, I will take a minute and just walk us through an overview of the process that we're about to embark upon and what we can expect over the next series of meetings. So we are right now at inception of the 2022 service review. We have 3 scheduled meetings to enable council sitting as Finance and Governance Committee to review the city's 17 service areas. We have meetings scheduled tonight, tomorrow night, and then next Tuesday, December 7th. The intention is that we will cover all 17 of the city's service areas during this time. The agenda that's before you includes 5 of our service areas. Each service profile contains consistent information. We highlight the council's expectations. That was those that were determined under last year's, our first formal service review. We also provide information on the staffing profile of each service area, some metrics or key performance statistics where we have those available. We'll highlight recent challenges and opportunities and recent successes for each of the city's service areas. We'll be providing status updates on the priorities that we all agreed to under last year's service review. As well, we will be outlining new priorities that will plan out the work for each of these areas in 2022 and beyond. The service review, and sorry, Amanda, do you mind flipping to the next slide? The service review is really our opportunity to have a conversation with council and ultimately to reconfirm council's expectations for the services and the programs that are delivered in each of the city's areas. Council has the opportunity as well to comment on the priorities that we are drafting for 2022 and to comment if there's any perhaps challenges or successes that you don't see outlined within a service profile, and provide that feedback to staff so that we can incorporate that information. Amanda, do you mind flipping to the next slide? So this service review is absolutely foundational to how we build our budget, to the financial implications that we compile into our budget and ultimately compile into our updated financial plan. The budget is prepared with the expectation that we will maintain existing service delivery unless we receive guidance or a recommendation otherwise, which may very well come during this process. Following service review concluding in early December, we will return to chambers in January to begin budget deliberations. Next slide, please. I wanted to take a moment and just provide an outline with the factors that are driving the draft property tax revenue increase for 2022. And I'll preface this by saying that this information is certainly preliminary. It's absolutely appropriate to use these estimates for purposes of approximation during this service review process, and to provide a little bit of context for where we are sitting so that you as committee have this information at back of mind as we consider potential changes to service in each of the city's areas. So we're looking at an increase of just shy of 2% to maintain existing service delivery. We're also looking at an increase, an additional 3.35%, and that's the increased funding that's required to support previously approved increased service areas. These all actioned under the existing financial plan. We've spoken recently regarding the anticipated Ecom funding transition. So currently the federal and provincial government share the funding responsibilities for the South Island Policing Ecom service. We have received preliminary information that we can expect to start to transition the responsibility of those costs to the municipalities involved. The information that we have today is that we can expect to see those costs effective April 1st, 2022. And we can expect that those costs will be transitioned over a 3-year period. And the first full year of full cost implications is expected in 2025. I say this is preliminary. We haven't yet received formal information otherwise. There has been some conversation that this transition may not occur in 2022. But if it does, we can expect another half a percentage property tax increase for that service. So before we get into consideration for how the new construction taxation will affect this and how any transfers to reserves or impacts of increased capital maintenance will affect us, we're looking at a tax increase of just shy of 6%. We're anticipating 1.42% will be the tax increase required to support the operating effects of new capital, as well as the recommended reserve transfers associated with new capital. The flip of that is we're expecting that our new construction taxation revenue to come in at $700,000. These are preliminary estimates based on the information provided by BC Assessment in October of this year. And so with those considerations and consideration to an additional 1% tax increase under the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan, we're looking at a preliminary property tax increase of just shy of 4%. So 4% before we consider any new or changes to how we deliver service under this year's service review. Absolutely.
I'm on now. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, through the chair, Jan, I just have a couple of questions. So I just want to be clear. This 3.5% that you said, just to continue on with what we've been, what we've agreed on before, is that in that number then? I just want to be clear.
Yes, so this number, this 3.92% tax increase that you see at the bottom here, this is the tax increase that's necessary to support existing and previously approved service increases, as well as the estimated increases of the impact of the new capital that's coming forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And just my second question, the 4.27% estimated new construction tax. What's the risks involved with that? Is that a fairly good number, or is it conservative? Can you just sort of give me your estimate on it? Thank you.
Great question through the chair. That's a fairly good number. So historically, BC Assessment provides us with updated estimated information in October. We'll get improved estimates towards the end of this year. And then in January and again in March, we'll ultimately get confirmation. Historically, we've been within about 90%.
Thanks so much, Jan.
Councillor Jansen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think I largely was going to ask what Councillor Kobayashi asked, but just the next step, how far out does that number take us? Does that take us to the end of 2021? Does that go, how far out does 3.92% with the forecasted increases? Is that the sum total of all the increases that we had from last year's service agreement until they're fully implemented?
Great question through the chair. Yes, so this figure represents the anticipated tax increase to actualize a number of increased services that were approved under both the 2020 to 24 financial plan and the majority under the current 2021 to 25 financial plan.
Thank you. Mayor Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the 1.92 existing services tax rate, sorry, that's me. My apologies. I'm used to tapping it twice. So I'll start again. Sorry. The 1.92 in regards to the existing services, could you, I'm just looking at the Canadian inflation rate. For September, it was 4.4. For October, it's 4.7. For November, they're anticipating that it will be 4.9%. I've seen forecasting going into 2022 being at least over 4% for Canada. That would suggest our tax increase of 1.92 is below the inflation rate. Are we confident that those numbers won't change significantly?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, relatively confident with this preliminary draft. We need to keep in mind existing service. A large portion of that budget is driven by items under contract. And so we do know with certainty what we can expect to pay. And when I say contract, works and services contract agreements, but primarily salary contract. That being said, where we have started to see cost escalations, we are absolutely adjusting the budget accordingly. So fuel, hydro rates, we are applying different costing factors than, so historically the last 2-3 years, we've applied a 2% inflationary factor. And you're absolutely right. We're seeing, month to month, the inflationary factors are more than double that. So we are absolutely keeping an eye on how costs are actualizing and incorporating that to the best of our knowledge into these estimates. And I do want to take a moment and just remind council, this is a preliminary operating budget. The team is very much still compiling the entire operating budget, anticipated changes to reserve transfers, compiling the capital budget. So these figures, like I've said, they are appropriate for approximations throughout the service review, but we do expect these numbers to be refined over the coming weeks as we gear up for January's budget deliberations.
Thank
Hope
you,
that
Chair.
answered your questions.
Perhaps if I could ask one question myself, operating impacts of new capital, could you explain how that works compared to, the increases that we've seen for things that we've approved above there? What's the difference between those and operating impacts of new capital?
Thank you for that question. So when we bring new capital on board, there's a number of cost implications that we need to consider under the budgeting process. One, we need to ensure that we capture any increased maintenance costs associated with the capital works. We also, ideally, we look at our transfers to reserve for existing infrastructure and ensure that we are increasing those transfers to support the fact that we're bringing new capital on board, and eventually that new capital will require replacement. This line item, the 1.42% or the $230,000, that is an estimate that will be refined as we finalize our updated capital budget to bring forth in January. But we do typically highlight that costing implication separately from that. Those above the lines are related to operating service program delivery and not that of our capital infrastructure works.
I'm going to have to wrap my head around that one. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just curious because you said that this is preliminary, and I do understand the process, but I just I'm really kind of asking this question to help our public to understand. So I know that in everything that we do ongoing, our staff are going to be working to try to review things and reduce costs where they can, be more efficient, etc. But because this is preliminary and it is going to be impacted by factors that we may just not know yet, how can the public expect to be involved in those future deliberations to report up to council, if you will, what areas they would like to see less of if we're going to have to be considering any reductions or trimming in the future based on issues that are outside of our control?
Certainly through the chair, the entire budget compilation process, and starting with the annual service review, which this is only the second year that the city has had such a process, is open to the public. So it's a series of public meetings. There is public participation. There is the expectation, certainly, that if there was public who had feedback that they wish to be considered, that we would hear that feedback through the process that we've set up. Perhaps it's appropriate I make mention, the year 2 property tax increase that was approved under the existing financial plan, the 21 to 25 for 2022, was 5.4%. This figure is the equivalent as a result of staff, one, reviewing budgets, also as a result of a more appropriate and a more refined new construction estimate that we didn't have this time last year. And so they're absolutely every year with the renewal of the budget and the update for the new financial plan that we are reviewing all of the estimates and assumptions and ultimately the building blocks that are used to compile both these operating and capital budgets. Service review really is a focus on the operating budgets that are required for each of the service areas.
Thank you. I just want to remind us all to keep our minds open. It's a big process learning about budgets for all of us. I've been here for a long time and still find it, there's always something new to learn. So it'd be really great if we could capture some of the things that we're learning and share those out. That's all.
Thank you. Not seeing any others. Jen, would you proceed, please?
Amanda, do you mind flipping it? And so this here before us is the impact of new cost considerations that weren't considered during last year's service review, nor were they considered during last year's financial plan compilation. So in particular, and we will get into the specifics of these with the respective service areas, but we're looking at a tax increase of 3.92%, consideration to how we're delivering the city's fire rescue services. And with the proposed implementation of a phased-in paid-on-call, we're anticipating a tax increase in year one of that implementation of just over 1.2%. In addition, when we get into the Parks, Trails, and Recreation service area, we'll also be highlighting an additional cost consideration for increased parks irrigation system maintenance. There is an additional cost that you would have seen that I did highlight in the report that has accompanied tonight's agenda, and that is the cost implication pertaining to the city's proportionate share of the proposed RCMP detachment redevelopment. It is not incorporated into the draft budget, and that's because a decision has not yet been made. But these costs that are being estimated, they are substantial, and at staff administration, we did want to bring them to council's attention, and we do anticipate that in the near future, there will be an opportunity for a decision to be made. And so in the report, there's a little bit of background on the Collier study that was undertaken in 2021. The recommendation that came out of that was looking at a redevelopment, and the initial cost estimates, the city's share is close to $17 million. Our RCMP related reserves are not near that balance. We're just shy of about $1.5 million. And so staff would be recommending a long-term debt servicing, which of course would have a public engagement, consultation, and ultimately requirement process in order for us to proceed in that manner. But we did want to highlight what the property tax implications would be for that debt servicing. And if we phased that debt servicing in over 3 years, we're looking at almost 2% tax increase per year for that servicing for the RCMP facility. And so again, that's not currently incorporated into the draft budget, nor is it really more than just a comment at this stage. But we did want to highlight that.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I'm pleased to answer any other questions. Otherwise, we'll be ready to proceed to item 5.2, which is the policing service profile.
Thank you. We'll take questions. I would suggest that we don't delve into the RCMP building at this point. I mean, as Director of Finance has indicated, there'll be lots of time to talk about it, and it could go on for a while. So let's not get there tonight. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. And I will not talk about that. I just wanted to have and I guess I'm looking to our Director of Engineering or financial staff. I know that the City of Victoria's new construction income was about 600,000 for 2021. And it looks like we're going to be about 700,000. And I just have a sense, I just feel, and this is a feeling, not a fact, that we're doing more than Victoria. And so I was shocked that our numbers are basically the same. I'm just wondering, is it because of scale? There's just, the City of Victoria is that much bigger and there's that many more projects that are happening that we just don't sort of hear about? Or why is our number so similar? Does anybody know? If nobody knows, I'll find the answer later on. It was just one of those things that sort of flagged it for me, and I happen to know the Victoria number. So I was just surprised that we're close to being the same.
To answer your question directly, no, I don't know the direct drivers of the city of Victoria, but I can certainly return with a breakdown of what's driving our estimate.
Thank you, Jan. It's not urgent. Thank you, Chair.
If I might just pipe in there, I did see an article, and I think it might be a year or two ago, when Victoria was suggesting it had as much growth as Langford did in that year. So when they grow with one huge apartment building at a time, as opposed to a house here and a house there. So that's probably the answer, but we'll see. Sorry. Proceed, please, Jen.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move along to item 5.2. We'll just take a moment and we'll pull up the policing service profile so that members joining remotely are able to view. And I'll turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer to provide an initial overview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Jen and I are going to share the duties tonight. And so as described, we're going to go through each of 5 areas tonight, seeking council's endorsement at the end of the day of the expectations that you first described last year. We'll reflect a little bit upon challenges and successes and opportunities for each service area. For many of them that we deliver directly, we've got some priorities from last year that we'll review and some priorities for the coming year. And then we'll get your affirmation about whether or not this is a service you'd like to maintain, increase or decrease after a more detailed discussion from my colleague, Ms. Hepting, about some of the numbers. And so we'll start with policing. Council expectations for policing, as you see on page 1 of 4, are to provide timely and effective policing and emergency response to our community, enhance the safety of our streets, provide quality training for members of the department, work with dispatch provider to take advantage of technological changes, and educate and engage the community. And so what I'm seeking to understand, if there's expectations that council would like to add to that list or remove from this. My expectation this evening is that the council expectation section likely may not change year over year. They often don't, but sometimes there can be nuance changed. And so first and foremost, I'm seeking perspective on whether or not there should be change for the policing expectations.
Council, anybody got any comments after reviewing the council expectations? More, less, different? Michael, Councillor Baxter.
On page 3 of 4 of this report, there's looks like a bit of a bar chart there with maintain, increase, decrease. And I understand you're saying we need to decide which we want to do.
That is correct. One of the last things that we'll do in each of the 4 sections is return back to that bar chart. And so administration's default position, absent other direction, as Ms. Hepting had indicated earlier this evening, is that we will build a budget that maintains the service. During service review, we may lift up things to you that cause you to ask us to change that level of service, either increasing it, changing the nature in which we deliver it, or decreasing it. For many of them that you see in the document, administration had pre-populated by color one of those 3 items: maintain, increase, or decrease. For policing, we have left it blank. There's an ask by the RCMP who deliver our service that we increase the membership by an individual each year in the coming years, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And I believe that's built on the expectation that our population will continue to grow. But to answer your question, at the end of the policing section, we will return back to that chart and ask you which of those 3 represents your belief set about how the budget should be built.
Okay, so just so I know what's coming, the fact that we're currently showing 1 additional member each year, that would be increased then, if we stuck with that.
It's a bit of an esoteric question. And so if we grew at, let's say, 1,000 people a year, and we added 1 additional member of the RCMP to help provide policing services, one could argue that that's the same level of service, because absent adding an additional officer, that same complement of officers would be providing slightly less service to each resident. And so in some instances, you would see an increased staff as a maintenance of a level of service. In other instances, if we were to increase staff to provide greater delivery of a service, perhaps increasing the frequency by which we empty garbage cans, as an example, that might be an increased level of service. But so to answer your specific question, it is if we grow, that could be considered maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi, anything?
Thank you,
on
Mr. Chair.
council expectations?
Yeah, just a really quick question, and it's the right time to ask this question, but when I first moved here to Colwood, they used to have a detachment right here in City Hall. And I think there was a couple of officers that we had here. And I'm just wondering, I mean, you know, with our growth rate, and we are now, according to the CRD numbers, we're 4th largest by population in Greater Victoria. And, you know, I guess my question is was it a financial reason why they removed the detachment from the City Hall here? Or is there a plan to have a detachment in the future? You know, it all has to do with, you know, policing right now. So it's just a question I have. I thought it was really good when they had it here, so.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. I wasn't around and can't provide specific comment, and I'm not sure if there's someone in the room who was when the Colwood Detachment dissolved or became a part of a larger detachment. I can tell you that there is currently no plan to create a separate detachment for the city of Colwood. There's a belief set that collective delivery of policing services in the West Shore with our partners is a more effective model. We certainly have some expertise in the room tonight who could probably provide a clearer answer if that's okay. Chair Parkinson?
Yeah. Let's.
I've seen the picture of the old detachment in Colwood. I would have to say that you likely have, I worked in 3 different divisions, 3 different provinces and territories. You likely have one of the best models for policing that I've ever seen in the sense of cost sharing resources. So to put it in perspective, you pay for 20 resources, I believe, in Colwood. We have a total of 97 resources. Equivalent detachment size to that would be somewhere in the souk size detachment. With that, they don't have 24-hour policing. They have just shy of 24-hour policing. They're trying to get to a spot where there's not a member on call. So that means that if something happened at 4 a.m, and people would know that there's no police officer working in your area between 4 and 8 a.m. If an incident did happen or did occur, we would have to call an RCMP officer out of bed. You're also paying for on call, which is getting more increasingly expensive. You would not have access to specialized units. They don't have anything other than general duty in souk. And so I'm just trying to draw a comparison when you say, and maybe I'm not quite clear on your question, whether or not it's we want to stay in the integrated detachment with West Shore, or we want to have our own detachment in Colwood. So I should probably seek clarity first from that.
Oh, sure. This is making it hard. Well, I can put you in the garbage can. I don't know how I can quite make you, Cynthia, I'm going to dump you and come back to you. And I'm going to dump Dean and come back to you. And I've got Dean, but I think hang on. Sorry, everybody. Slightly different system today.
Won't turn it off this time. So no, actually, it was not. I believe still in the integrated model here. So
Okay,
don't get me wrong here at all. It was just that. It's just that the size of it's going to be growing here, and then you've got this whole thing down in Royal Bay that's going to happen in the future. I'm
Yeah.
talking long term here,
And, but, you know, there was a reason, smarter people at one time decided that it was a good idea to put a detachment there. And then other smarter people came along and decided it wasn't such a good idea. So I was just wondering, you know, if there was cost implications of doing something like that, or, you know, to having, you know, to bringing that back, you know, it's just for, you know, a safer community, the feeling for safer community by having the detachment here. I've heard it from residents, so I'm just bringing this up. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
No,
that's the putting my question into context here.
Okay. No, I would see little benefit, given the proximity to the detachment, the current detachment, where we're looking at, you know, a potential rebuild. The reason and the rationale is also the fact that our police officers now have computers in their cars. Back in the day, they didn't have a computer in their car. So regardless of where they are within the jurisdiction, they can still write up their files, typically from anywhere in the jurisdiction. And so we make sure that the membership, as best they can, they don't come back to the detachment. So when they go to a call down at Royal Bay, they don't have to come back to the detachment. In the old days, you'd come back to the detachments and you'd write up your files at the detachment. Now we have the ability to write those files up as we're sitting, you know, in the school zone, and people think that we're doing traffic work, but they're actually writing up a file. So it kind of gives a dual purpose at that point. So does that kind of provide clarity? No problem.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Day, and while I'm trying to keep this focused on council expectations, I bet Councillor Day knows why that detachment was closed.
Unfortunately, you have Dean up next, I think. Oh, no, I am up. There we go. I do know a little bit about it. It was a community policing location. And I believe the original reason why it was located here was proximity to the school and the operation of the DARE program. Eventually it didn't seem to be effective at the time. It was hard to know when someone was actually going to be in the community policing office because it was relatively mildly staffed, shall we say. I'm just curious, it still eludes me after many years of trying to understand how everything works. Who actually reviews the operation of your detachment? Because I don't think it's us because of the difficulties with talking too much about your staffing in open meetings, etc. We do approve your budgets, but of course, how how your detachment actually runs is largely not something that's made really clear to our citizens. So I just am trying to understand, how do you decide what is the most effective way to run the detachment, and who reviews you?
That's kind of a broad question, but obviously I listen to 7 mayor and councils that make up the West Shore, and I speak with council members and members of the public on a daily basis. Probably the most often or most called upon call for extra resources is in traffic. That seems to be always a concern. It doesn't matter what community you're in. And so every year we set, and we usually have a meeting, but the last couple of years we haven't been able to have a face-to-face meeting to set up our priorities, operational priorities for the year. And typically we'll sit down with whoever's on this council that has been selected as part of the police board, if you will. And we'll sit down and we'll set our priorities based on your decisions, what you think is a priority. Most often time, it's the same ones: the crime prevention, the traffic, community policing, First Nations, Indigenous relations, property crime, especially in communities such as this where there's so much construction, so much infrastructure going on. Obviously, with that comes rampant theft and mischief. So those are that's how we set our priorities, by meeting with all of the councils each year, and also listening to constituents. we hear from them every day. The second part of your question, I'm not quite familiar with. Maybe you can articulate a little different.
Well, I guess we have reviewed, basically we're working from statistics that are in your reports. But those statistics are about, what type of crime, whether it's more than last year, less than last year. But we don't look at anything to do with, how you operationalize your force whatsoever. So I'm just curious, because we do that for our departments here. We would talk about, how does that work? So I'm just trying to figure out what is a way that we could, kind of peek behind the curtain and know what the real issues are and where the what makes the biggest difference.
I mean, I'd be happy to, as I've mentioned to all the councils, I would be happy to meet with you individually. I'd be happy to arrange for a ride along with any of our council members at any point for them to come out and see on a day-to-day basis what the calls are, what the priorities are, and how we handle and prioritize files. Would that be something that you're?
Yeah, it for sure. But I don't, I'm trying to stay in my lane and figure out where the right lane is, to ensure that the services that are there for all of our citizens are effective and safe. And, because I have fielded phone calls from people saying, and they're just phone calls. I have no idea. But when a member of the public reports things to you, I think we have an obligation as their elected official to find out, well, how do we know? And how do we verify? And what I've found out in everything I've done so far has said, that there are times when the RCMP, just like every other facility, whether you're going to the swimming pool, there are days when you show up and so did everybody else. And I'm sure that happens for the RCMP too, but I'm trying to step back and look at it more holistically. So how do I compare West Shore RCMP to other RCMP detachments and come up with a rationale that I can speak to my public with full confidence that I didn't just, read statistics, that I actually looked at how things are being done, not just the numbers.
Okay, I think I understand. It's just, like I said, it's such a broad topic that you're suggesting there. We're very open and transparent about what we do and how we do it, and certainly open to, if there's other areas that are doing things better, then we would love to adopt those measures. Yeah, I mean, some of the things that we have done, a prime example is yourself. Actually, a number of years ago, you mentioned about, sexual exploitation and the exploitation of young women. I heard you. And not just you. There was others in the community that were worried about exploitation and sexual exploitation. And so to that end, I came to Robert and to council and asked for money to have a counselor work with our community policing officer. That has come to fruition, and it has been probably one of the greatest successes I've seen at this detachment. They have intervened in a number of very high profile cases and unlikely saved a number of very, very vulnerable individuals from hardship that they would never recover from. And so those are the types of successes. So when we talk about priorities, I hear from you, I hear from everybody else on here. And like I said, the other 6 councils that I go to on a regular basis or speak with on a regular basis. So I guess, realistically, you have to have faith in me and confidence in me that I'm listening to you and I'm actually doing what you ask. I've made sure we've increased our traffic section. That's another one. We made sure visibility is key, that we don't sit there at the back of the detachment and write up files, and then we park ourselves in strategic places based on analytical data, which is gleaned to us and brought to us from our analyst in the detachment that's saying, you know, we've got 10 traffic complaints outside Dunsmuir School. And so I guess that, I mean, you asked a very broad question. I'm trying to give an answer here, which I'm struggling to give you specifics, other than to say that the only way that I can address these things is to actually hear them. And that's why I always encourage, especially any council, to email me directly and personally, so that I can try to address it, even though it may seem trivial. It's easy for me to forward that on to the appropriate body to get action and then let you know what we did.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. I won't have any questions for you. You're welcome to have a seat if you wish.
Oh,
Or you can stay there.
okay.
Or stay put. It's up to you.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Two things, Mr. Chair. I'll be concise and I'll stay on topic, which is council expectations. I would like to add an expectation, and it'd be along the lines of that we seek to achieve an ideal officer to population ratio. And I'm not sure, I'll leave that with you, Robert, wordsmith how you want, but do you need a motion on this or anything, or is that enough?
Through Chair Parkinson, I think it's best practice if a council expectation is going to change, that there's a motion. There's other parts of this document that I think we can easily edit and motions are not needed. But where a council expectation is being changed, I think it adds value to both process and the product if there's a motion. So seek to achieve an ideal
Officer to population ratio.
And I hear silence on
What that might be,
numerator.
because again, it's one of those esoteric numbers. But I think it reflects that we're on top of this. We're gonna, as our population grows, we'll adjust accordingly, which clearly we're doing. It's in the material. But I think that's aspirational in nature, that, hey, we're gonna be hiring more officers as we grow.
So so seek to achieve an ideal officer to population ratio is an additional council expectation.
Thank you. I'd make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Councillor Baxter. Can you turn yourself off there? Or hang on, I can do it. Oh, darn. I like
Looking at the numbers we have in front of us, we're showing a 2.5% population increase. And the increase in the percentage increase in the police strength, 2021 to 2022 is 5%. And thereafter it gets slightly lower, simply because that's the way percentages work, but going down to 4.2% in the final year. So is it staff's belief that we will grow it faster than 2.5%, or that we are currently at too low a ratio of officers to population and we need to increase that ratio?
Can I just caution everybody here that, you know, this is a worthwhile discussion and we need to have it. But we also have a whole bunch of other stuff here tonight and 2 more nights. So if it's about service review, which this one is, then let's have it. But let's be careful that we don't spend too much time. We all complained about how many hours we spent in service review meetings last year. So let's keep it close. So go ahead. I'll ask Mr. Earl to address your question, but just a caution to the rest of you. And I haven't even had my question yet, so we know how long that's going to take.
I'm just asking questions about the numbers we have in front of us.
I know.
So the numbers that you have in front of us, the RCMP has requested an additional officer each year. And that's why they form part of this document. In terms of the work that administration has done with our colleagues in the West Shore who also collectively delivered this service, Colwood is projecting to target a 1 to 900 officer to population ratio in the fullness of a 30-year time horizon. And my expectation is Colwood today is probably at a number above 1 to 1,000.
So in other words, we are intending to increase that. Or should I say decrease, whichever it is, improve that ratio of officers to population over this period, because we think it is too low right now. If it's at 1 to 1,000 now.
So I think one of the important things to think about or to consider in this area of service delivery is as communities urbanize, the nature of their crime changes and the amount of crime per person actually increases. And so it's in the 30-year time horizon. At year 30, administration has estimated that the 1 to 900 makes sense. I wouldn't suggest that Colwood is of the belief that we are underserved today. I would suggest that Colwood is of the belief that we're going to experience growth and we're going to need to budget for additional police services to accommodate that growth. And that as we get larger, that will come with greater crime per person as we in closer to the 30-year range than in the today range.
Thank you.
Okay, I have speakers lined up, but we have a motion on the floor. So Mayor Martin.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to the motion.
Please.
In regards to the motion that's before us, what I can support it, but I guess what my concern is, would staff be taking that motion as that is the metric that the city should be using, whatever that, because I don't actually believe that that's the metric we should be using to figure out what our force is, no matter what that ideal number is. I mean, we can find out what that ideal number is, but we should be looking at crime and also sorts of other things. So I'm concerned about this motion being the metric. Is it the metric that we would be aspiring to in the future?
Staff would not take this as direction that that's the only metric.
Okay, thank you. Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Well, same question. I was just afraid of that metric there, so.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, any opposition to the motion to seek an ideal ratio for police? Councillor Day is opposed. Thank you. I believe Councillor Jansen, you had more to say?
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, because it doesn't relate specifically to this, but it does to Councillor Day's comments. That kind of granular oversight of the policing service, I believe, was lost. I think many of us at this table were parts of the Protective Services Committee over the years, and that went the way of the dodo when we changed our committee format. I know that some other communities have chosen to retain their protective services oversight. And I would argue that there's probably room for us to do the same. And those more specific discussions, because I remember being on committee with Councillor Day that, we had more granular discussions specific about specific sections within the department. And that seems to have been lost, that connection. That would be my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair Parkinson, can administration add to the opportunity list consideration of a protective services committee?
I'm happy to make that motion if you need.
Motion not required.
Thank you. And then just before we leave councillor expectations, hearing what we can't all avoid, the discussion of mental health issues primarily downtown and the police reaction to them, I guess I would hope that the police are, I'm sure they're seeing way too many mental health issues and moving along the continuum of where they should be as far as police only and social workers only and where they should be in our community and then doing the best they can there. That's, I don't quite know how to frame that in an expectation, but I would expect that the mental health issues in our community are dealt with as appropriately as possible. And I suspect not 100% by the police force. You could put that into an expectation, Mr. Rowe. Oh, I need a motion, so I do.
So at council's, sorry, committee's discretion, administration will return with this one with some wording.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, obviously we look to the advice of Superintendent Preston. Is it superintendent? Or,
In terms of mental health, is that what you're?
well, yeah, and just, we know there are people in our community with mental health issues and we're sure you deal with them all the time and
Well, let me put it in perspective. Last night, we went to a hanging of an individual had PTSD and unfortunately surmised to his injury. We went to a younger individual who took, I believe it was 85 pills, took her to the hospital. I believe she was admitted at that time, obviously. We went to 2 other mental health calls. And that was just last night alone. So that's our typical evening. 24 years ago, I would go to 1, maybe 2 calls a week regarding mental health. Now it is so common that our job has changed so much over the years. We have asked, I specifically have asked for the province, because mental health and healthcare in general is a provincial responsibility, that they ante up. And I know that it's going to, right now, they're actually looking at it through the Police Reform Act in terms of partnerships with mental health practitioners riding with us. Obviously, it's a very complex issue, and not for this evening to get all the way through it. But I mean, not every call we can send a healthcare practitioner, and sometimes you don't know until you show up what you need. All that to say is, like I said, the counselor position, we're working with the youth to try to be proactive so that we don't end up with those types of calls that we did last night. The mental health component here, what you can do for the police and for your detachment is to lobby as hard as you can for, complex care facilities where these individuals can get the care and the need that they need, as well as health practitioners to work with us. There isn't a single member that doesn't want healthcare practitioners working with us. And last night, by the way, it was, I believe, a 3-hour wait for each. There was twice we took individuals down to the hospital, and you spent 6 hours, probably closer to 7 hours on policing last night while we sat there and essentially babysat somebody while they awaited a doctor. That's not efficient. Nothing about that is efficient. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to stay up here and continue with mine, or I think I'm going to go back.
I think we're back to Mr. Earl there.
Chair Parkinson, can I assume we've moved on from expectations?
In fact, I so decree.
Uh,
Oh, I'm
Chair-
so sorry. I missed Councillor Day.
Sorry, I was just hoping to speak briefly to the mental health issues with some kudos for Colwood, because we have for over 20 years now been municipally supporting mental health services for our community, which is where the councillors that are working with the RCMP are coming from. We wouldn't have that already set up if previous councils hadn't had the wisdom to support that. So that's a really great step for Colwood, and something that I think if we want to talk about parameters for mental health, we should invite the councillors to give us some input. There are a number of brand new programs that are started up, especially for youth. I was just given a website about 2 weeks ago for new programs that they're starting for youth with mental health and addictions issues. So lots of great things trying to do the proactive preventive care, and kudos to this and many other councils here who saw that coming.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I'm going to move to page 3 of 4, challenges and opportunities. The first challenge, which has already been alluded to, is the building. The building is nearing the end of its capacity. There's been some preliminary work done with Langford and View Royal. Conversations need to continue with the 3 communities until we can get to a point where we have a joint recommendation, and we're not there yet. But in terms of scale, the work that we've done thus far indicates that if we were to build for the 30-year horizon, that a $67 million structure would need to be constructed, and Colwood's portion of that would be 17 million. Earlier in the document, you saw that that would translate to a 5.6, give or take, tax increase. And so we wanted that to have that on in your minds as you move through service review. A decision on that is likely to come to this council and other councils in the 2022 calendar year. The second item, it's already been alluded to, is dispatch services known to be delivered through a company called Ecom. First year, that would cost us approximately additional 80,000. In the final year of phase-in, an approximate 400,000. And so that is a cost or a challenge that is challenging kind of the delivery of this service. And now we've captured consideration of Protective Services Committee as an additional opportunity. And so I'd like to hear if council has any other successes or challenges you'd like to include on this document. And my recommendation would be that motions aren't needed. If an individual has one, we'd just like to get it into the document.
Thank you. Anybody with opportunities and challenges on the police service? Well, superintendent? I still don't, is it superintendent now? And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you
Hopefully
very
I said
much.
that already, but yeah.
So I know we're running little tight on time here, so I just thought I'd obviously the space issue. I just want to amplify the fact that we are running out of space. We are pretty much at capacity. In fact, I'll have to ask Jen here to probably put into the budget for some CCANs this year. We are out of space in the exhibit areas. The increase this year, if your position is passed, View Royal, it looks like they will likely pass one position, and Langford has committed 3 more positions, so 5 more positions into the building. We will run out of space in a very well, we are running out of space in many areas already, and we're gonna have to start looking to see cans and other alternatives until such time that we can get a new building or a renovation constructed. So I just can't amplify that enough. We brought this to the attention close to 3 years ago that within 3 to 5 years we would be out of space. We will be out of space, and it will definitely start to affect operations at some point. In terms of the 5 positions, I just wanted to let you know the 5 positions that we are looking at adding this year. 2 of those positions is to create a special victims unit. There's just basically essentially dealing with sexual assaults. Virtually, we'll try to get all the sexual assaults off the watches, which is the frontline police officers, and try to get those into a more specialized team that are able to and have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to investigate those. They're too serious, too high risk, and I think the public deserves and needs that type of attention. And so we're at that size. If we can learn from any other, we always learn from other detachments, and there has been a number of other detachments and municipal police forces that haven't given this enough attention, and it has had very negative and long-lasting effects on our victims. 2 other positions is just to increase or to deal with the increased call volume and the complexities of the frontline policing. And the 5th position is another police dog. And the reason is as we get more urbanized here, the types of calls, as Robert had alluded to, the types of calls certainly become different, and oftentimes, especially with the mental health component, that is a tool that we can use instead of other tools. So it's certainly a less lethal tool, and oftentimes it changes subject behavior. Just having that dog present, it changes their behavior so that we don't have to go hands-on, or we don't have to use, God forbid, something that's long lasting. So those are the positions that we're talking about. Any questions from
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question, but on the police building, the challenge funding, of course, what would really help me make a decision is looking at different funding strategies. So rather than a 2, 2, and 2, perhaps there's some cost benefit to the taxpayer if it was like 1, 1, 1, 1, as an example, building a bit of a kitty, for lack of a better term. and in anticipation of those costs, because they're coming. It's just when we start to save for them. And I hearken back to when the new pool was built, the city borrowed or taxed early and saved, I believe it was about $1 million just from taxing a wee bit early. So I'd be interested in different strategies to be able to minimize the impact on the taxpayer, whether we have that in 22 or 23. But it's just my comment. Yeah, thank you.
No, I don't know. Are we gonna talk? We have the appendix 1, the police operating budget. Is there I know we need to decide whether we want to maintain, increase or decrease. Do we want to talk about the budget as well, or?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I'll call Ms. Hepting back up, who'll walk you through Appendix 1 with the police operating budget. Once we're done that, then we'll return back to direction on maintain, increase or decrease. Thank you.
Okay. Jen.
Thank you. Preface this by saying my intention is to be brief with the overview of each of these operating budgets. Budget deliberations, I will certainly spend more time and do a deeper dive. With this being the first Appendix 1 that we'll be walking through of 17 service profiles, just take a minute to walk you through the outline. Any service area that has related funding, that will be listed first. We'll then move below funding for that service area and look at the core operating budget to support existing service delivery. Then below that, we'll move down and we'll look at any budget that's necessary to increase services. And we'll indicate whether that's a previously approved increase or if that's new for consideration. And then we'll move in if there's any other additional impacts on the operating budget. So we've commented on a number of the factors that are impacting the policing operating budget already tonight. And so I'll just run through those. The existing financial plan 21 to 25 approves the increase of an additional member in 2022. So increasing our strength count from 19.6 to 20.6. Beyond that, we do not have any approved strength increase incorporated into the existing financial plan. Should we receive direction otherwise, we will look. And so what we have drafted before you is the proposed increase of an additional strength each year up to and including 2026. Currently, as our Chief Administrative Officer mentioned, we are just over 1,000 members of the community to each strength. With this, we are moving to just over 900 members of the community per police officer with what's proposed. The Ecom, that $82,000, that's based on initial cost estimates that we've been provided, assuming that that transition does occur effective April 1st, 2022. That may not happen, and if that's the case, we will return with a refined budget. At the bottom of the appendice, you can see the taxation that's required to support this service area. Simply, that is the total funding generated less the operating expenses. We're looking at the taxation required. Taxation per resident, that's a new metric that has been provided for these service areas. Specifically, that's calculated, we've taken BC stats estimate for 2020. 2019, we experienced a 2.5% increase. Administration feels it's reasonable to apply that increase annually on a linear, and that is what we've done so that we can provide you with some consideration of what the taxation required is per resident, and you can see the impact to the community growth. So with policing in particular, if you look down 2024, 2025, 2026, taxation per resident is estimated to be almost consistent. The growth in the budget is due to community growth. Pleased to answer any questions. And I will note, I did make note of Councillor Logan's comment regarding additional considerations for how we can transition the community to the cost implications of the detachment rebuild renovation, and we can return at budget deliberations with some additional considerations for council.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Day.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't know why the camera has kept turning to me, and I'm not trying to interrupt you when you're talking. It just was trying to indicate that I had a question. So my question is, with the budget that's presented and the increase of 1 officer per year, when I read the statistics based on our past growth, 2.5% a year has been in the neighborhood of 600 new residents each year. And I'm just curious, I'm concerned that by putting all our eggs into the RCMP basket, when we've just heard presentations about how important it is to also have counselors, and I would assume that the next thing we're going to have is going to be, also considerations from our counseling services as well, that they are going to also need more hours. So I'm just concerned that if we focus strictly on our RCMP numbers, I don't know if that's going to always be the only service that we're going to need to address the needs within the community. I know that there are certain needs that only RCMP can address, and there are certain needs that only counseling may be able to really address. So I'm just concerned that does this leave us with the flexibility to address those issues as they come clearer to us?
Through the chair, to answer Councillor Day's question directly, absolutely, this leaves you with the flexibility. This is in part why service review is broken down for each of the service areas. You are being asked to consider each area independently, and then of course, the financial implications of those considerations will be rolled together for consideration during the annual budget process. That is why I must stress that the expectation is that no decisions on budgets are being made during service review. We listen. If there are recommendations on service delivery, we will incorporate those recommendations into the draft budget. This is not the time that budget decisions are being made. We will return and you will see the overall impact of those recommendations once budget deliberations begin. But you're absolutely right. There are a number of service areas that are impacted by community growth.
Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Similar, along the similar lines, I've had that concern, but I guess my question right now, and maybe the CEO can clarify this for me. When we're getting these people to help with the mental health right now, to alleviate the RCMP from doing that type of job, like we're funding that right now municipally. Is that our swimming lane? I'm just asking the question, should we not be going after the provincial government for help in this area? Why is this? I mean, I'm not trying to shrug responsibility because we need it, but is this something that municipal taxes are supposed to be used for? I'm just curious. Your perspective would be great on that.
I believe Superintendent Preston indicated if we were to lobby strongly for greater provincial supports in this area, that would be beneficial. It seems the tradition in British Columbia is this has been a provincial area of service delivery. That said, policing is firmly a core municipal service. Right. And ultimately, it's up to this table to determine what services are within your lane.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. And my second question for you, Jen, specifically, I noticed that the increases are due to extra additional FTEs and for the comms, for the dispatch, Ecom. But how about, I understand that, and good for them, the RCMP has now, have a union and they collectively have a better deal. So I don't see those numbers in here. Should there not be a tax lift for that?
Thank you, through the chair. Absolutely. And there will be a tax increase. We have under the previous budget incorporated the 2.5% tax increase. But looking at the preliminary draft 22 budget for core, we're seeing an increase of 1.2%. When we return during budget deliberations, that will be slightly higher.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Actually, just what Councillor Kobayashi was just discussing, because I'm looking at 2023 budget. Looks like it goes up by about $400,000, and it's about $300,000 it goes up 2024 and 2025 under contracted police services. Those are the numbers I'm looking at, and that would be significantly higher than the one FTE that we were bringing on. So I'm assuming that additional costs are the union contract lift. Is that correct?
Not quite. That additional cost is, so as we move down in 2022, we're increasing the core budget for an additional FTE, which then rolls up into that contracted policing services line item within core for the subsequent year, as well as the Ecom rolls up into the contracted policing services. But
okay. Oh, sorry. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but so I hear what you're saying. So the numbers that I'm looking at contracted police services are Ecom plus the FTAs that are being added. So where is the union lift contract number showing up?
Thank you, through the chair. So that union lift is what you're seeing as 2.2%. Or $75,000 increase over the prior year. In part, our fiscal year slightly differs from the federal fiscal year, so there's a minor impact of that. In addition, this draft budget will be refined. The core operating budget will increase slightly. And when we return at budget deliberations, I do expect that figure will be closer to the 2.5%.
Awesome, thank you. And then just a final comment, just in regards to service review. Chair, looking at for 2022, the draft budget costs roughly $240 per resident for the city of Colwood, and I think that's a huge value. I would very happily pay that out of my own pocket to have that police service. So not all of it, just my own.
Thank you. If I could ask one question on the lease revenue, what's that?
Absolutely. The lease revenue represents Colwood's proportionate share of the earnings that we earn at the detachment building, specifically the federal and provincial leasing for the detachment. Minor portion, firearms, the majority is leasing revenue that's generated in that property for other services, not our responsibility. And perhaps the superintendent would like to clarify with specifics.
Thanks. So the province does have seven members in the detachment. So because we have Metchosin and Highlands, that is the provincial contribution into your West Shore detachment, but they don't own the building. You guys, the Royal and Langford own that building, so they have to pay rent to you every year. And we also have 2 Canadian firearms officers that are in that building as well. So that's why you're getting lease revenue from that every year.
So I noticed that lease revenue flatlines, and I also noticed that our support services and building budget is $1 million. You know, we have 20 officers or whatever it is, and there's a proportionate numbers for the provincial things. Are they getting a smoking good deal out of that lease?
Probably for another day.
Fair enough. Okay, let's move on. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to perhaps bring this to a discussion to a bit of an end with the understanding that this budget will include the 1 FTE for 2022 and the cushion for the communication center, if it heads that way or not. I believe we're looking at maintaining then, is that right, Mr. Earl? So I'd make that motion that we maintain the current level of service as specified in this report.
Thank you. I have Councillor Baxter. You want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that as the mayor said, he'd be pleased to pay $240, but that's $240 per resident. So it's more like $500 or $600 per per residence.
He can afford it. Anybody else on the motion? Seeing no further comments, those in opposition to the motion to maintain policing services? Seeing none, that passes.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I'm going to move on to page 1 of 7 of fire services and begin with council expectations. That we provide timely and effective emergency services to our community, that we provide quality training to the members of the department, that we engage with regional partners through automatic and mutual aid agreements, that we work with dispatch providers to take advantage of technological changes due to the next generation of 911 services, that we explore volunteer retention and service delivery models as our community grows, and that we educate and engage the community through fire prevention and safety initiatives. Those are your expectations. Does council like to see any change?
Council, anybody got any thoughts on this? Let me ask something that's topical for at least myself. Electric vehicles is something that this council is quite in favor of, and we ask people building parkades to wire them all for electric vehicles. You don't have to go too far on the internet to find a pretty hellacious fire when one of these things gets on fire, with the big proviso that they create toxic fumes, and for God's sake, don't put water on them. That's the worst thing you could do. But if it goes off in a parkade with a sprinkler system, it's going to get water put on it. So I just, I guess my expectation would be that the fire department understands this and is prepared. God forbid such a thing should happen.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I'm assuming expectation number 2, provide quality training to the members of the department, would capture known and emerging risks, such as the one you described.
Fair enough, that works for me. Any other comments on council expectations? Nailed it. Next.
Sorry, looking at page 2 of 7 then, you can see our staff position history and forecast, and then some stats relative to training hours and our volume of response. Moving to page 3 of 7, in looking at some of the successes, completed the installation of the training lighting area, initiated meetings and established a survey to review paid on call auxiliary firefighter programs in other departments in the region. Initiated implementation of emergency social services modernization, to name a few successes. On the challenges side, planning for the expansion of residential development in Latoria South, ongoing planning and implementation and potential implementation of a paid on call system, changing demographic and makeup of our community, challenging road infrastructure, increasing traffic and congestion, to name a few. Does council have any more challenges or successes you'd like to add to these lists?
Councilor Jansen. Challenges and successes.
Well, I would like to challenge something that was said, but sorry. I love all this stuff, quite frankly. I can get behind all of this. The only concern I have, and the thing I noticed this afternoon when I was reading through this, is that we're being asked for potential budget lift, and captured in that is a paid on call approach to our fire service. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
So as my colleague Ms. Hepting had indicated, this is not the budget process, though it forms the foundation of the budget process. And so you're not being asked to approve any budget lifts this evening specific to paid on call. This was foreshadowed at last year's service review, and work has continued to more deeply understand our service delivery model and its sustainability into the future. And if you look at Appendix 3 in the attachment, you can quickly see that we're a bit of a standalone in terms of not remunerating our volunteers when it comes to either training or responding to calls. And we endeavor to hit a 10-minute standard, and I think Chief Chow is here and can speak at more length, but we endeavor to meet a 10-minute standard in terms of our response an NFPA standard. And our belief set is that unless we change what we're doing today and consider either a paid-on-call system or another system, that in the future, we're not going to be able to hit that target, and therefore the service delivery to the community is going to decline. So to answer your question very specifically, a request for decision will come to you as part of the budget process for you to consider a transition to a paid-on-call model such that we can continue to provide 10-minute call response. That decision will be isolated, and you'll make it adjacent to and as part of the budget process. But we wanted you to be aware during service review that this ask was coming, because we are aware it's material and it could affect how you might adjudicate this and or other services.
Thank you. So that's a yes in the end. Is that right? I'm just checking.
With a bit of a pitch.
So I am 100% behind some of these changes, suggested changes. My only concern from this, if I'm being asked to vote for an increase, presumably suggest an increase for the future budgeting process, I have a paragraph and a table. And I think this is a far deeper discussion with regard to paid on call. And I'm hoping, my expectation would be that there's a more in-depth document that's on its way in advance of the
Yeah.
budgeting process.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen. And that's why it will be a separate request for decision. And again, it's a bit esoteric, as the previous conversation with Councillor Baxter about policing is. Our belief is, without a change in service delivery, our service is going to diminish to the community because our capacity to deliver 10-minute response won't be there. And so you could call it an increased level of service, because we're going to improve our capacity to respond, and therefore increase the probability with which we're going to hit the 10-minute mark. But you could also call it maintain, because unless we change our service delivery model, we're not going to be able to maintain the 10-minute service delivery approach. Perhaps I can have Acting Chief Chow comment more about this specific item.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
So just to give you a little bit more in depth in regards to what we're referring to for our metrics in terms of response time, NFPA 1720, which guides the volunteer departments, does stipulate 10 minutes on scene with 10 firefighters 80% of the time. Currently, right now, as you see in your metric right now, we're down to 89% of that calculation base. And quite conceivably, it's a little bit straight, because during the daytime when we have career members on, we can get out the door generally within 2 to 2.5 minutes at the most. And we do generally have a short response run, so we can meet that 10-minute guideline. Our second truck will then be there within that time, potentially 10 to 11 minutes. In the evening times, when we don't have staff in the station, that's where we fall behind. And one of the options that we are exploring is to man the station 24/7. That'll get the initial truck out the door 24/7, 365 in that timely manner. And that's what we're looking at the present time for that model to take place.
I think that I don't think you'll get much pushback from anyone on the council that those are certainly things that we need to maintain or even expand and grow. I guess my ask is that I'm hoping that a robust presentation will be with us in advance of the budget consideration, so that we can knowledgeably vote, because I see that there's different methodology here. There's paid per call, but there's also paid training, and some departments have gone one way, some have gone the other. I would like to have a better understanding of the why and what might work for our community versus some of the choices that these other communities have made.
And without getting too deep into it for that longer discussion in the future, some departments that don't respond to as many calls as us, as you'll see, such as Qualicum Beach and Dashwood, they pay per call. So it doesn't matter the length of the time, they just pay a set rate. But what we are looking at potentially for a win-win for both the firefighter as well as for the city is to potentially look at putting members in the station, so that when calls come in, they are responding right away. So in regards to that, they're also, they would be training on that evening for that shift. So that's part of their training section as well.
So that sounds great. So the answer is yes, we'll
Yes.
get a
We will get you a more
deep dive in
detailed
this
and
before
deeper
budget.
report for you, so that you
Thank
can review the
Yeah,
options.
thanks, Chief. I
for it.
appreciate all that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
I just wanted to suggest an added challenge, which is the changing weather, heat domes and drought leading to more grass fires and possibly forest fires.
Thank you. I think I'm now looking for a motion to maintain or increase, which I think would both mean the same in this case.
Sorry, thank you, Chair Parkinson. If I could just spend literally 1 minute on page 4 of 7.
Oh, okay.
Which is the 21 priorities. We've got a list here of the priorities that you gave us last year and where we've landed on them. And I won't speak to any, but I'm happy to answer questions on any. And then you can see the 22 priorities that we intend to move forward on here. And so this is, again, your chance. If there's something here that you don't think we should be doing, now is the time to tell us. Otherwise, this is where we're going to focus beyond day-to-day service delivery.
Thank you for that. Council, any comments on priorities for this year and next? Mayor Martin, you're first.
Thank you. How, sorry, I don't know if it fits priorities or not, so I do apologize, Chair, but how do, around inventory of vehicles, how does that fit within priorities? Does that fit within priorities? Is that budgeted completely separate? Like, are we looking for advice from committee?
Specifically on firefighting apparatus, through council's larger service review document, you have directed administration to come back with an asset replacement plan for the fire fleet. And we owe that to you in the 2022 calendar year. So it is, we will absolutely capture it here. It is captured in another document as well.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. And it is captured here in our 2021 priorities to continue with multi-year plan for maintenance and replacement. It's like the third bullet from the bottom, right above the 2022 priorities. And I just wanted to offer kudos for the way that this is laid out, that we have I think correctly identified this as an increase in the document, although I know there's kind of a bit of a waffle position on whether that's maintain or increase, but we have opted for the more politically correct, I think, increase. And I think that's important. Our fire department has done a lot of things for us over many, many years, lots of dedicated individuals there. But what I really wanted to compliment us on is the addition of the shared firefighter emergency program coordinator position, because that's something that we kind of really benefit from some individuals who volunteered for many, many years with the city, providing pretty much that to us, and then finding that once they retire, we quite miss them. So I just think it's really good that we've got that documented in our planning. Whether or not it happens this year or next, we are seeing more and more issues around climate change, storms, heat waves, floods, fires, all of it. So having those emergency preparedness and coordination with the fire department, I think, is very important.
Thank you. Then I think I'd like a motion to, I'm going to say increase the fire department, and with the recognition that it's strong support for the paid on call or whatever it may be, but subject to further review. Councillor Kobayashi's made that move. Any discussion? Any in opposition to that?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Moving to page 1 of 7 of the building and bylaw. Service review, council expectations for the bylaw side, the health and safety and security of the public is our primary objective, followed by preventing damage to the environment, supporting our community standards, impact on the complainant, and nature of the complaint. Followed by the city seeks voluntary compliance as our primary objective. The city provides reactive or proactive enforcement in accordance with the attached schedule, which is labeled Appendix 2. And comparable statistics are kept and reported publicly twice annually. On the building side, we apply our regulations consistently. We have an industry-leading turnaround time. We have upfront communications about the process with residents and the industry. We offer a user-friendly approach. We provide responsive rather than proactive. That should be up in bylaw. And we use technology to leverage efficiency and effectiveness of the department. Does council have any expectations you'd like to alter, add, or remove?
Council? While you guys think about that for a second, I have to be honest that in industry-leading turnaround time on building permits doesn't turn my crank that much. I mean, let's make them good, but let's not kill ourselves to be the fastest possible. Let's be the best, not the fastest. So that's not one that appeals to me. But any other comments here?
Sorry, is that a motion to remove that expectation?
Yeah, I'll make that a motion. You gonna speak for motion, Councillor Day or Councillor Kobayashi?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you can be both though.
Absolutely.
So, if you want to change the verbiage to both, I mean, still want to be fast though. I think.
I'm not saying we're gonna be slow. I'm just saying that the chasing the pinnacle is there's probably better use of staff's time than to actually be win the marathon.
Yeah, well, it implies to me, you want to be fast, but the way that the staff work here, they're very professional. They're not going to take the shortcuts. I don't think so. That's how I interpret it. Okay, regardless, I'm okay with the wording myself.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I agree with the motion, not because I think we should be any slower than we need to be, but we did receive a lot of negative feedback for a time until we actually looked into it. And it was incomplete applications that were often causing the issues. So we've done a lot of things to try to improve that for the development community, including a number of checklists. So at least from my perspective, my council expectation is that it's absolutely thorough. And if it can be fast too, that's great. I'm certainly not going to object to it being fast, but I don't think my goal is to make it fast. My goal is to protect the community.
Sorry, Chair Parkins, just for absolute clarity, administration is in no way sacrificing quality and completeness for speed.
No, of course not. I don't certainly not trying to suggest that it's anything wrong with being the fastest or the best, but I'm saying, of all the things you have to juggle with in your day, saying I want to be the absolute fastest is not that important to me. I mean, if the fastest guys do it in 5 days and we do it in 6 or 7, I can certainly sleep at night. Hopefully our building department can as well. I don't know. It just seems to me, achieving industry leading turnaround time is not something that is that necessary. Industry, good gold standard doesn't have to be the best. That's my thoughts. And I have a motion on the table. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually won't be supporting the motion. I think we need to trust our staff to be able to find the efficiencies to be able to provide that gold level service and that turnaround time. And I think that's what's happened. The spin-off effect is time is money. So when we're looking for investments in our community, whether it's for affordable housing, commercial, whatever, the longer they wait, the more it costs. And those costs trickle down to the individual renter, to the commercial property developer, on and on and on and on. So I think it's our way of helping the industry and our community grow by ensuring that we are efficient and timely. And I'm glad that Robert had stated that, we are performing in a safe way. And I trust our staff to be able to do that and find efficiencies to make us that much better. So I think we should applaud our staff for doing that. And we should, yes, strive for quick service, providing that we stay within the box of safety, et cetera, which I would expect our staff to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, those in opposition to the motion? That motion fails.
Thank you, Chair
Am I
Parkinson.
supposed to list who, Amanda, sorry, Mayor Martin, Councillor Logan, Councillor Baxter, and Councillor Kobayashi were in opposition.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Turning to page 207, we've got staff position history and forecast. We've got kind of year-to-date building permit issues. Interestingly, one of the stats you'll see here halfway down the page, new dwellings permitted. And this number, if you cast forward potentially a year with a single family residence or 2 years with a multi, could do a pretty good job of predicting population increases if you assume 2.1 people per dwelling. And so these numbers can connect to other parts of the document. The following page, we've got some successes listed, restructured bylaw service and building services to better meet the new needs of our community. Occupancy permits at 342 Whale, 330 Goldstream, and the first phase of Colwood Corners. Improved internal coordination with other departments, implemented the BC Energy Step Code, educated our community to obtain voluntary compliance, transitioned to a bylaw notice format. We've made some headway in unsightly premises cleanup, and we provided bylaw services outside of regular hours based on community needs. From a challenge perspective, the construction values that we use for our building permit process are out of date, and you will see a request to make some change in the coming year. Employing technology to streamline our processes is a current challenge. You and the provincial government have funded a software solution to that, and staff are actively working on it. An out-of-date complaint tracking system, working with the old ticketing system. Overnight parking on the Cobourg Peninsula was and might potentially continue to be a problem. Concerns with school zone safety, including parking in bike lanes. And we've got some increasing complaints in the area of fireworks. Does council have any additional successes or challenges or opportunities you'd like to add to these lists?
Council, Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Are we capturing construction that's occurring specifically on Sundays and how we're addressing that? I would consider that a challenge that we're having, but I don't know if it's being captured anywhere else.
Perhaps I'll have the team members speak to how we've been addressing that.
Good evening, council. Yeah, we definitely track complaint through the chair, to Mayor Martin. We definitely do track when we receive those and we have an address to go to, and then follow up with that on usually the Monday specifically.
Right. So we're not dealing with it. I guess what all I'm saying is putting it under challenges is that residents who see construction on Sunday usually would like it dealt with on Sunday, not to have to contact the city on Monday and then have a whole thing. So it's just that we don't have a response time. So that's all I was looking to add onto from a challenge standpoint.
Yeah, usually we'll see a better pattern with that specific property when we do follow up on Monday. We don't typically see a repeat offense with that, but point taken.
Yeah, I think, and again, I realize we're in service review, so I don't want to, but the comments I get back are, I call on Sunday, I get voicemail, and so I don't leave a message because I'm just frustrated because there's nobody there to help me. So I don't know if we're actually truly tracking everything or not, but Again, I would just like it listed under challenges. Thank you.
Sorry, on that particular item, staff did receive a number of complaints earlier in the year, and the team proactively scheduled time on Sundays to go out and check. And so we did do some stings, if you will, of the construction industry based on complaint tracking.
Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. It warms my heart. It really does. So I did pick up on along the same lines as his worship, but as a challenge or a future opportunity, I would like to see us move forward with some summertime weekends. No, it's an endless discussion. We've had that discussion, which I know is difficult given the language in the collective agreement. But I do see that as a future challenge and even an opportunity for us.
Sorry, we did execute on that a couple of times this year, and we will endeavor to do so more. There is mechanism within our current collective agreement to allow for.
I'd just love to see us continue down that road. I'm sorry, but I bet if we mapped out the number of complaints on Tuesday morning versus Saturday morning, it probably pales. So having that availability on the weekend, increased availability on the weekends.
Thank you.
Council, do you have anything else under successes and challenges? Seeing none.
Turning the page, looking at priorities for 2021, you can see on the building and the bylaw side, a number of complete and a number of in process. In 22 priorities, we see propose a new building bylaw that accurately reflects the construction value, Tempest software implementation, an additional, a replacement of a building official 3 with a building official 1, looking to improve safety of school drop-off and pickup, particularly with illegal parking or stopping in bike lanes, continuing to focus on overnight parking at the lagoon, and then the fireworks issue. Would council like to hear from Ms. Hepting on the financials?
Council, first, if there's anything on the priorities that people would like to speak to, let's go that. And then how are we on the financials? Everybody comfortable with those, or? I think we're going to let her off the hook on this one. So I guess we're looking at a motion. I'd probably take one motion, Dean, to maintain building services and bylaw services. Oh,
sorry, Chair Parkinson, just before you do that, I just wanted to draw council's attention one more time to Appendix 2 within this document, page 7 of the service area, which is a listing of the typical bylaws that our bylaw team gets involved with, and which ones we proactively enforce and which ones we reactively enforce. And I just wanted to to give you an opportunity to move any of them from reactive to proactive or proactive to reactive. But this is currently our best guess in terms of your expectations of how we deliver.
Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Sorry, I was still on Appendix 1. Are we okay if I stay on Appendix 1, or we move to Appendix 2 now?
Just because it's you, I'm going to let you go.
Okay, thank you. Could staff just briefly explain that in the 2021 projected, we have $1.4 million in building permit fees, but the draft only has us at $1 million. So that's a significant decrease, $400,000, well, 17% change. Could you just speak to that briefly?
Certainly, through the chair. Thank you for that opportunity. These numbers are absolutely preliminary, and we do anticipate, as we continue to refine these projections, that they will increase for the draft 22 budget. In particular, to highlight for the 21 projected actual was the impact of Colwood Corners in particular, receiving occupancy, and the impact that that had on our revenues in 21. What I did want to highlight with respect to this operating area, and we'll also see it in development services and engineering, is as we continue to refine the budgets that are associated with each of the city's service areas, we look at what is the funding that is required to generate those services. And the flip of that is what are the resources that are required to generate that funding. And so with building permit fees in particular, it's not just the resources of the building service area, but also resources in development services and on our engineering teams that are utilized to drive those permit fees and are utilized as part of that permitting process. So this is the first time that we've shown an internal reallocation. This initial reallocation, as I mentioned in note 1 on appendix 1 there, is based on our estimate. So our estimate of the staff time overall that's required and the staff time in particular, so 15% with development services team, 10% with engineering. And as we move forward on this, we will reallocate those fees internally to provide partial funding for those other service areas that support this work overall. And so you'll start to see that in the service areas. But to get back and to directly answer Mayor Martin's question, I do anticipate that the draft 22 building permit fees will increase, and we will refine that when we get before you in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how my peers feel, but I believe there's an opportunity here for us to conduct some proactive work with our urban forest bylaw. And I would like to see that that move to also being proactive. Do you need a motion, Mr. Earl?
So yeah, for this type of change, a motion captures it into the record. For the specifics of this, we'll return not at this meeting, but at a later meeting to deepen our understanding of what council's expectations might be in terms of proactive enforcement of that bylaw.
In a nutshell, I believe that there are some flaws in that bylaw when it relies on, I'm uneducated as far as the sophistication of the bylaw, but it largely relies upon people submitting photographs. Photographs from where and of what, and just some kind of fact checking in my mind that yes, that tree in the picture was planted at that home, or inversely, there's a permit to false a particular tree today. Can we get out there and have a look and make sure it's not the mature fir tree that's going, it's the juniper hedge, you know, that kind of proactive activity.
Thank you. If council moves to move this into a proactive column, administration will come back with options.
Yep, that's my, sorry, that is a motion. That's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Anybody to discuss the motion? Councillor Day. No. I think I can do this. I think somehow Councillor Kobayashi got in front of you. That might be my fault. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead, Councillor Day.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm having trouble following the bouncing ball here, but yes, and thank you very much, Councillor Jansen. This is what I had clicked my button for, in fact. So I'm glad that you noted that. And my, I just wanted to add my 2 cents worth to help staff in the preparation of what's to come forward to council. A number of areas of our OCP talk about the natural environment of Colwood and its importance to our residents. So as our, sorry, the name just left me, but the integrated design, site adaptive planning, thank you, just was gone. It is really integral to the way our OCP was developed, and it's been something that we've worked really hard to bring forward. And if we're not being proactive with our urban forest bylaw, then we could stand to significantly lose what we gain through that site adaptive planning. So that is my focus. Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification. When you're bringing back the options, it's
going to also include the cost impacts then also?
Sorry, administration would not treat this as an additional cost. Administration would treat this as a reallocation of how our bylaw team's time is spent and where they're focused.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mayor Martin.
Question has been answered. Thank you.
Okay, my only comment is it's hard for me to see how proactive versus reactive applies in this situation, but Councillor Jansen's made the motion and we'll vote on it. Those in opposition to Councillor Jansen's motion to move the urban forest bylaw regulation to proactive from reactive. Seeing none, that passes.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. That brings us back to page
excuse
507, and we're looking for.
Mr. Earl, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask a question on the overnight lagoon parking and how proactive enforcement is interpreted there?
Certainly, I can have the team speak to it, but I am aware that we schedule and attend the lagoon on a regular basis, provide education to folks who are transgressing the regulatory framework that exists down there, followed up by further education, followed up by warnings, and now followed up by a new ticketing system, which is much more efficient. We also work hand in glove with the province, where folks are overnighting there because of economic constraints, to ensure that those folks are connected in the best possible way to supports that exist. So that's how we're currently working to enforce the overnight parking ban on the peninsula, but perhaps I'll have Byron speak more.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so sensitive topic, as we all know. We've tried to find a balance to improve the pattern. And we're proud that we've only issued one MTI ticket at this point, and we do feel that the pattern has greatly improved. And to be able to confirm that they are not following the bylaw that we have in place, we have provided the service after hours. Starting off with twice a week, we were doing that. And then once we saw the pattern improve, then we've dropped it to once a week. But as Robert mentioned earlier, our new ticketing system will be able to track, first, we're always shooting for education, and we want to be able to show a detailed timeline that we do care about the person's situation. But if they are being defiant and if they're going against the grain, then sometimes a situation warrants a ticket. So.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I mean, that sounds excellent to me. I guess I don't use that view at night. If somebody else wants it, they can have it. But yeah, there are people down there who need a hand up, not a ticket. It sounds like you're walking that line as well as any of us could do. So
Yeah.
congratulations. And tough situation. So thank you for that. I don't
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Unless I should stay up here.
No, it was. Oh,
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. We're looking for direction on both building and bylaw separately.
separately. Okay, building services. Anybody want to make a motion? Councillor Logan has moved that we maintain building services. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, any disagreement with that motion? Please maintain building services, bylaw services. Councillor Kobayashi moves to maintain. Any discussion on that motion? Any opposition to that motion? Seeing none, we'd ask you to maintain bylaw services as well.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. May I move to development services?
Have at her.
Council expectations, clear communications about development applications and the process, align projects with expectations of the community through the official community plan, enable high quality building design and siting through application of official community plan design guidelines, prioritize the natural topography, environment, and climate impacts site adaptive planning in the processing of applications and developments. Encourage development that increases employment opportunities, ensure timely processing of development applications, and support council decision making with timely, concise, informative reports. These are the expectations as council articulated last year. Would committee like to recommend any changes?
Committee, any thoughts or changes? While you think, I got a couple. The fourth bullet, prioritize the natural topography, environment, and climate impacts. Should we not also prioritize the quality of life for Colwood citizens, present and future? I would think, you know, you sort of sound like, well, we like the trees more than we like the people almost. So. Might be true in some cases. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I do think that our expectations could be clarified a little bit, and that as far as prioritizing humans, we are responsible to humans. If they don't like what we do, they can change their representatives. But the nature, and I found it surprising. I know I'm a nature nut, but so are a lot of the other people in Colwood, and I run into them regularly and chat with them about how important it is to our quality of life. So I think if we're taking care of our natural environment, I think we are taking care of our humans too. Only difference being that the nature can't speak for itself. And one of the things that I wish to bring up was about our alignment with the official community plan. And that's something that has been the subject of a lot of debate from the community who've contacted me, different interpretations of our official community plan. And of course, it's very difficult to decide that something either does or doesn't fit within the official community plan, because the official community plan may have aspects that are true on one particular spot that are not true on a different spot. So, you know, overall, our community is going to have parks and it's going to have houses, and they're not always all going to be in the same place. And so that, to me, I think we need to be very mindful that our community expectations and what we've captured in our official community plan are communicated out in a way that is similar to the official community plan. So that maybe one way of doing that would be to talk about the things that we've accomplished in each area of the official community plan, that we don't have, you know, only buildings one year and only parks the next year, that we talk about that balance and how we're working towards creating it. It's not an easy fix. I'm not suggesting that this is something that's easy. I'm just trying to share what I've heard from the community about what their concerns are. When we talk about the official community plan, not everybody is in agreement that we're achieving it or that we're not achieving it. So we just need to have more communication. Thank you.
Chair Parkinson, might I recommend an expectation surrounding official community plan implementation reporting regularly to council? However, I would suggest that that belongs in the community planning or long grade planning section, and we will definitely bring it back during that session with council.
Okay, thank you.
On the, I wasn't clear on the quality of life and whether that was an amendment to bullet 4 or whether that was.
I think I'd like to see that written down. So yeah, I would make that as a motion to amend bullet 4 to include prioritize natural topography, environment, climate impacts, and quality of life for present and future Colwood citizens. Counselor Baxter, on the motion.
Can I just suggest that you make it a separate bullet? Otherwise, I think that bullet is going to become overly complicated.
Yeah, that's what I meant, a separate bullet.
Okay.
Thank you, Amanda. You can adjust that. Apart from that, any other comments or seeing none? Any in opposition to that motion? That passes. You have the floor, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you. Success has strengthened the pre-application process to guide applicants on land use, site adaptive planning, and form and character to encourage complete applications. Improved development application processing times, increased site visits on active development, team building and expansion of the departmental expertise through successful backfilling of 2 full-time planners. Increased public access to the application information and development permit process through Colwood.ca. Improved deliverables and timelines for subdivision, rezoning, and development permits. And continue to support integrated development application process review for all development applications, including such things as pre-application meetings, development review committee, referrals, engineering review, and corporate service streamlining our public hearing process, as well as advancing major developments, Royal Bay, Allendale, Olympic View through subdivision and development permitting, Latoria South, rezoning amendments, development permit approvals for a shopping center at Latoria South, continue to advance the OCP vision through rezoning, development permitting, and subdivision, and implemented a Parks and Rec master plan vision with objectives. Does council have anything you'd like to add to the successes?
Council? Looks like a pretty complete list, Mr. Rowe.
Moving to challenges, public and community expectations with respect to alignment of new development proposals with the OCP vision. High volume of complex development applications, outdated bylaws and policies, our applications procedure bylaw, our subdivision and servicing bylaw, our sign bylaw, our parking standards. As council is aware, we're working on some of these. Customer service, expectations for prompt customer service, and a lack of understanding of the timelines, and ensuring strong residential access to the development permit process. And we're hoping that our Tempest system will eventually provide a much better service, but we are working our way toward that. Does council have anything you'd like to add to challenges?
I suspect whoever wrote that was being quite modest in the challenges that are faced every day in development in Colwood. Any comments from council? Mr. Baxter, Councillor Baxter, sorry.
I'd just like to ask on the public and community expectations with respect to alignment of new development proposals, exactly how we see that. I mean, my personal opinion is that, like most OCPs, it's written to be all things to all people, which means that when you read what you wish was in the OCP and you find it in the OCP, there's always another clause somewhere else that cancels out or opposes what you wish to see in the plan because somebody else wished to see something else. But I'd like to hear, since we're looking at this as a challenge, I'd like to hear how staff look at it, because that obviously is the direction that we'll go.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, Brent Wilmer speaking to Councillor Baxter. It is a challenge, and exactly what Councillor Day pointed out. It is the perception of what's being read, what's being applied, the perception of you all, and the integration of those guidelines and procedures that are applicable to that specific application at hand. It's a challenge for the community because we do believe that all of our processes best fit with the most educated and informed people that we can have. That's your audience, as well as the information that's presented to yourselves. That's why we've gotten into the pattern of providing you the OCP considerations as part of your report. And we've worked to provide that clarity in terms of met, not met. There are times when we bring forward an application that does indicate that consideration has not been met. We work to bring those into alignment with clarity, again, as I say to the public, as being met in as many instances as we can. But it's working to educate and use that document as a policy tool and direction tool, which is intended to be in as most of a public manner as is possible. And we do invest significant hours of the week with our public, showing them how that's being implemented, as well as the public forum with you all. If we can bring greater clarity, we're always interested in that, as we continue to use that tool as our tool that's at hand, as you consider rezoning applications and the like. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're good.
Hearing no additional challenges to add to the list, turning to priorities. Support the parking bylaw update. We're almost there. Support amendment to the community amenity contributions and attainable housing policies. Those are moved to the first quarter. Parks and Rec master plan is complete. Streamline report and permit templates complete. Administrative support with general inquiries, tree permits and file management complete. Land development software in progress. Small lot design guide is in progress. Update our development application forms in progress. 22 priorities, maintain development application processing times, review development application fee structure, implement Parks and Recreation master plan through rezoning and subdivision, and continue to support Royal BC Museum initiatives through availability of the team. Would council like to hear from Ms. Hepting with respect to the financials?
Do we want to discuss priorities first?
Or, sorry. Absolutely love to hear your thoughts on priorities.
Council, do we have pertinent thoughts on the priorities? And while, again, if I might, and I don't know if this is the right place to put it in, but perhaps a priority would be to consider a design panel for the community. I just see so much development coming at us that that might be an assistance. Certainly, some of the projects, I struggle with what they're going to look like when they're done and if they're actually white. And then I know our staff has got a lot of things on their plate. So perhaps a design panel might be a consideration, something to consider whether it made sense for the community. Don't know if anybody else on council feels that way.
Chair Parkinson, with a shift such as that, a motion would be most helpful.
Right. I'm going to see if I got any support before I go down in flame, as I usually do.
Chair Parkinson, I'm just wondering, can you tell us what that looks like? Because I'm not quite sure if what you're thinking of as a design panel fits with what that conjures in my mind.
Okay, so, and again, I may not have it right because I'm not an expert on design panels, but my sense is that you sort of go out to the community of architects and landscape architects, and get them to sit on a panel to review submissions as part of the overall review process that goes through to the city, and make sort of design related comments. If you twisted the building, you get better solar light, or this doesn't match with that. Just as a way, if we're trying to create special places, perhaps an added thought to just a strict, one-off development type of thing. So I'm honestly not, I'm not saying we have to have one, but to me, it's something I think we should explore. Just again, given the amount of rezonings we've done lately and the amount of development that's coming, I think gets to my thought of what we're trying to do for quality of life for our citizens. If we have create spaces that in 10 or 20 years are nicer because they've been through a design panel than not, then it's a good thing to do. I don't think it's a big exercise as far as the timeline of a significant project goes, or a cost exercise. So, but I don't know those things, which is why I'm asking to explore rather than implement. I have Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I do have some reservations about this, but I would love to hear from the staff on this idea actually right now. Honest.
The design panel will typically get into the architectural project. It's what we call, thank you very much. It's what we consider the doorknobs of a project. And it would, I would consider it an increase of service because it would substantially slow down staff's ability to deliver an objective timeline. It is, it obviously may reflect council's will and vision. However, it would significantly impact the ability to deliver in a timely manner, in a concise pattern, as well as objectively provide information to council. However, if council wished it, I would advocate for an increase of service and perhaps additional staffing resources if council also wished to maintain the flow of process through the city as it stands right now. You asked for honesty. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I absolutely understand there. I think I understand where Councillor Parkinson is coming from. I think there are no architects that are going to be remembered for any of the construction that is happening on the West Shore in 100 years. And nobody is winning awards that I'm aware of because frankly, some of the construction is pretty blah and lacks interest. So I guess I would be interested then, Brent, if the design panel isn't the way to go. If there are other levers that we can pull to foster some creativity, some uniqueness in the construction and appearance of buildings. Maybe that's through the design guidelines or something that's less onerous, but puts an expectation out on a prospective developer or builder.
I greatly appreciate that question or statement because it allows me to augment the brutal honesty and truth that I provided to the previous question. Strengthening the design guidelines that are presented in the official community plan, as they're pretty broad. For example, they do not include any guidelines for tall buildings, which would be any building over 6 stories, would greatly apply the ability for an architect to grab some of those guidelines and have them realized. That would be where I'd first look to recommend is the strengthening resources, because that's the will of the communities expressed through our official publication.
Councillor Baxter.
I like where Councillor Logan's going with this, and I like the reply from staff. And I think that might be something we could try first before going to a design panel. There was a sort of a design panel, I believe, at some point during the last administration. And I think it provided good advice, but there came a point where the advice wasn't appreciated and the design panel never met again.
Perhaps I was wise to canvass council before I made a motion. So let's look, for a motion perhaps along the lines of asking for, well, I don't know if that makes it a priority, but maybe it does, asking for a report on how to enhance design quality for projects in Colwood. Thank you, Councillor Logan. Everybody got that motion? Any discussion on that? Any opposition? Thank you. Okay.
The budget.
Budget, please.
So with respect to the development services service area, when we look at the anticipated revenues moving into 2022, we are anticipating the activity to be similar to what we experienced in 2021. As I mentioned moments ago, we are proposing an internal reallocation of a portion of the building permit fees relating to the approximate proportionate amount of staffing from this service area. And then moving into the operating core budget. As I mentioned at the third quarter, for many service areas, we came in under budget, primarily due to staffing transition impact, as well as deferred training, PD, consulting dollar spend. Moving into the 2022 draft budget, we are looking at a decreased budget of approximately 2%, and that's as a result of the financial implications of the internal restructuring that occurred this past year. Pleased to answer any questions.
Councillor Baxter.
I'm just trying to phrase this question properly, but it would appear, since there's taxation required in this case, that our permit fees are not enough to cover all of the work that we're doing on the permits. Am I misunderstanding what I'm seeing, or is that the case?
To answer your question directly, I would argue that it is not directly the case that our fees are insufficient. That being said, we have flagged fees in a number of areas where we recognize we do need to review the fees that we're charging and ensure cost recovery. We have started to look at our service areas and understand what services should be directly funded through fees and what service, regardless of fee occurrence, would still be required and would ultimately still require taxation. This is a somewhat lengthy process and is something that will take us a number of years to refine how we show the information. But to directly answer your question, there is some activity that occurs within this service area that absolutely would occur regardless of the level of activity, of development activity for the organization. And we would see taxation funding.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Jen. I meant to ask this earlier, and it's a really neat measurement that you use here, and that's the taxation per resident. You use that as a measure, and it's an excellent measure, but it's an excellent measure if we can benchmark it against something. Is that what the plan is then? So just.
Thank you through the chair. As we highlighted, I believe earlier tonight, this is our second service review. It is absolutely our intention to refine the information that we bring before you each and every year. So to specifically answer your question, absolutely, it would be very helpful as we move into next year, or 2 or 3 years out, to be able to compare this to similar size municipalities, for example, to get an understanding of what the costs are. There's certain service areas where it is easier for us to provide that context because of how the information, we have more certainty, apples to apples comparatives, for example, policing comparatives across municipalities. Other areas, we don't know with certainty that we're comparing apples to apples, but to answer your question directly, yes, it's absolutely our intention to refine this information with each year that passes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommended service level be maintained as is indicated there.
You're good with that? Yeah. Any discussion on the motion? Any opposition to the motion?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Moving to engineering. Council expectations, consistent application of the bylaws, strategic priorities, policies, and regulations of the city. Deliver high quality capital works and services that meet engineering specifications and consider our environment, changing climate, universal accessibility, and fiscal responsibility. Apply a complete streets approach that conforms to city's mode priorities of active, transit, goods and services, and then vehicles. Timely response for review and inspection services. Protect existing infrastructure and inspect new construction to protect against risk and ensure quality and conformance. Every decision will consider the climate emergency and how to mitigate and adapt. GIS to be optimized to meet the needs of the city and to support asset management. Does council have any changes to additions to or removals from the expectations?
Councillor Baxter.
I just want to compliment staff on an excellent set of expectations, which you probably provided us with last year. But anyway, I think it's really well written and I'm really happy with it.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll second Councillor Baxter's comments for sure.
Just would like your definition of complete streets. Please.
Streets are not for vehicles only.
Okay, great. So I guess what I was trying to draw out of there too is a little bit of like complete cross-section that may include things like landscaping, lighting, that sort of jazz for us to consider for each project. That's kind of where I was getting at.
So, sorry, absolutely. So rights of way are the public realm. The public realm is a place where the community gathers. It's where they move through. It's where they can stick around, where they can be in awe of built form, beauty, or each other. And so they're very important spaces. And so a complete streets approach takes all of those things into consideration.
Thank you.
Any further comments before we move on? Okay, Mr.
I
Earl.
just got to say, I love the idea of the public being in awe of each other. I think we need to encourage more of that.
I'll move on.
Make it a priority.
So we've got performance measures and key stats on page 2 of 6, and you can see our permitting activity year to date. Moving to successes, development cost charge bylaw adopted, led in the creation of an updated development services bylaw, and you will see that soon. Updated template for stormwater master plans, the chosen painter sidewalk and bike lane infrastructure, transportation master plan improvements, updates for major roadways, VMP, Wishart were considered and concluded in 21, and Machosen Road to Wishart 21-22, drainage flow monitoring, rock face / geotechnical right-of-way assessment complete, greater implementation of GIS, Allendale VMP works and services are underway, and street sign update are our list of successes. Does committee have any additional successes you'd like to add?
Anybody? Don't see any.
Moving to challenges, consistently increasing volume of development. Lack of formalized land development tracking software, and our Tempest installation will ideally rectify that, and staff are actively working on that. Continued education and training in relevant fields to further develop staff efficiencies. And due to recent changes to the Professional Governance Act, engineering staff, APEG and ASTT have increases in training objectives for future years. Does council have any challenges you'd like to add to this?
Council? Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Can staff speak to, I hear from some developers that we have a staffing labor issue, that there isn't enough staff to do the work, and that there's been suggestions of them actually paying to increase staff to do review and so on. Is what is before us on page 2 of 6 the adequate number of staffing, or are we going to be going through a budgeting process where we'll see an increase in staffing requests? Or how are we going to at least answer the question by the developer that there isn't enough labor in the building?
Sorry, I'll take a first stab and then turn it over to Mr. Molnar. If you, the page 2 of 6 that you referenced, if we look at 2020 actual full-time equivalent 6.5, 2023 plan 10.5, we recognized and reacted.
I almost don't think that needs to be added to. The engineering department, interestingly enough, though, doesn't just respond to the development community. And I think that if you only looked at the development community, they'd always be correct. There's never enough staff to quite address their needs. They want it delivered now, and they want it delivered yesterday in a timely manner. I'd like to draw your attention to the other areas of metrics that are considered on page 2 of 6 of the engineering forecast. And just look at the iCompass request for service, 1,422. That amounts to a request received and dealt with every about 3 minutes of the working day by a staff member. So competing for interest of the engineering is not just the development community, but our existing community. And they are equal. And so we are working to devise a system where we are adequately addressing the needs of our community while addressing the needs of our business community as they help to enable us to grow. And as Mr. Earl indicated, we're more than thrilled to have introduced the two people. Thank you very much for them. They came late though in 2021. Not through failing efforts. Well, actually, no, through failing efforts, we weren't quite able to actually bring them on board. We tried 3 times and we're very pleased. And we'll be more than pleased to monitor that progress in through 2022. We've had about 4 to 6 weeks to be able to integrate them into the system and for the uptake of our capital projects as well as continued delivery of service. So we'll be more than pleased to continue with that question and continue that answer as we move forward into the future.
Thank you. So through the chair, can I just then confirm, is labor a challenge or is it not?
So labor has been a challenge. We have.
And I'm specifically talking about it being in this report. So I'm just talking about when you ask challenges and opportunities, is labor a challenge that should be in here? Correct. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think how to answer. Sorry, so if we lose folks on the engineering team, it will be a challenge to recruit new ones. So absolutely. The labor market on the engineering side is a very difficult one to be in right now. And as we have expectations to have 9.5 people on board and operating and 10.5 next year, if one of those wins the lottery or is attracted away to someone else they met in the public realm, then yes, it's a challenge.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Baxter.
Under council expectations, there was mention of dealing with climate change. And under challenges, climate change doesn't appear, which it sounds wonderful. I'm just checking in to see if staff feel that they absolutely, well, not have climate change under control. They feel it's not a huge challenge to be able to adapt to it so far. And certainly the atmospheric rivers that have gone by haven't seemed to challenge us very much. But overall, I would think that there were challenges coming. So I'd like to hear from staff on that.
Thank you for that observation. We will add impacts of climate change to the challenge list, both in terms of the real impacts of things such as the rivers that are with us this week and last week, but in terms of the organizational challenges of learning how to think in a new way with that emergency being part of our thinking.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, I think that's the challenges.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. 21 priorities led in the creation of the updated development services bylaw complete, standard templates for next steps procedure complete, stormwater master plan template we've deferred, improved contact relation to applications development complete, optimized staffing levels complete, working with the approving officer to bring forth a policy regarding development works and services in small lot and infill subdivisions, and council will see that soon. Use of software for label costing to better understand if additional resources are required, and that's in progress. Is that a Tempest? And then on the GIS side, internal land data parcel map complete in 2022, sanitary mapping and data capture, 2023 storm, and then you can see 24 rights of way. Those for the 22 priorities. Latoria Road, geotechnical environmental review, completion of templates implementation, completion of the development services bylaw, commence Galloping Goose Bridge crossing subject to funding. DCC projects, Latoria at VMP, Latoria at Machosen, Wishart frontage. Update template for stormwater master plans, TMP update. Continue to work with BC Transit. Implement 2023 and 2022 active transportation works and services that council clarified for us. Update the sanitary master plan, the Bexhill Strata sewer project, and the Allendale Patterson Pit storm drainage project. Those are the 2022 priorities as we see them.
Council, do we have other priorities? Now you knock off that list, we'll be happy. Oh, Councillor Day, sorry.
Thank you. I believe, and maybe you've already solved that problem, but I didn't notice it in any of the previous bullets of things that we've already done. But we have been monitoring a number of large built forms. I don't know what else to call them politely, big rock walls for any changes over time. And I just didn't see that accomplished, and I didn't see it on the list of things to update us on for 2022. And I would really like to know if there's been any movement.
Sorry, there's been progress, but no movement. So council will see, likely as part of the budget process, the outputs of that work, inspection work that was done in 2020 and 2021, which will begin a more a programmatic review of structures such as you're describing. And that will likely form a budget line item as we keep an eye on those. Not necessarily because we think there's a financial risk, but there's certainly risk associated with structures of those that we need to be mindful of. And so that will return to council likely first quarter of 22, or sorry, in the budget process. So first quarter of 22.
Sorry. Yes, we're aiming to bring a budget forward in 2023 for those works as we analyze all the data. We have completed all the geotechnical reviews of our hazards and walls. Largely it comes down to a bit of maintenance, but there are some areas that have been flagged for further investigative works. It's those areas that we're going to be processing in 2022 and look at an annualized expenditure based upon the recommendations of the geotech firm, which was Golder and Associates, for the forthcoming years. We believe that we can translate it down into an annual number as opposed to an escalating, de-escalating number. And that'll be coming forward to council for consideration as part of the budget process with a brief summary output to council as part of that.
Thank you.
No further questions? Oh, Councillor Jansen.
Are we there yet? I'm happy to
We're
make
not
the
there yet.
motion.
No, we're not there yet.
Great.
Let's talk
The
about
finance stuff.
Gotta let Doug talk about finances.
Accepting.
I know.
With the engineering area, when we look at the permit fees, our draft budget for 2022 is somewhat consistent with our draft budget for 2021. And I will make comment, we do look at running historical actual averages to also help us substantiate these figures as we move into the next year. With the operating expenses, you'll see we're anticipating a 3.7% increase to the core operating budget. As the note indicates, that's primarily related to an internal reallocation to ensure that we're capturing all of our GIS related costs within this service area. And it is our intention as we return in budget deliberations, we will break out the GIS related budgets so that it's clear for council the resources being spent in that area and our proposal moving into future years. As my colleague, Mr. Molnar mentioned, the 2021 projected actual, the primary reason that is under budget is due to the Q4 hiring of the increased engineering staffing this year. And so we will absolutely see the full implications of that moving into 2022. Please answer any questions.
Mayor Martin.
Thank you. And again, I understand we're in service review, but could you just briefly comment on the right-of-way permit fees? and why we saw a significant $130,000 increase over budget, and that why we don't anticipate that that revenue will show up this year?
Certainly, and I won't speak off the top of my head to specifics of 2021, but I can absolutely return unless Brent Molnar can. The 2022 draft budget, when we look at the 4-year historical actual average for our right-of-way permit fees, they're hovering around $200,000. That in part formed part of the expectation moving into 22. 21 as it actualized, large portion of that was related to the Royal Bay area. To return with specifics, I would have to do unless.
That's exactly right. As Mrs. Hempting pointed out, we are undergoing a fee review over the next years about how we're looking at our fees and if they're truly capturing some of the costs that are incurred in those fees. In recognizing that our right-of-way permit fees were a little bit low and the amount of works that were happening from some development sites, for example, Royal Bay, to facilitate the Royal BC Museum, there was a significant amount of time being invested without recoverables. We worked on an interim fee structure with that developer that we are intending to bring forward in our development and servicing bylaw and fee bylaw as we proceed into 2022. That'll be presented to council for their consideration. However, it was accepted by that developer because it was being brought about. It helped to fund some of those additional resources and helped to deliver on some of their goals. So that is what that increase that you see there, predicted 200 and intake in 300. That's from that.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry. I guess the question I'm looking to have answered is, could someone speak to and explain to me, where did the additional $131,000 of actual income under right-of-way permit fees arrive this year? And why is that not arriving next year?
It is exactly what I've described, that
Yeah.
singular developer willing to prepay for the service that was not wholly contained in the bylaw as of yet, but which was descriptive of our fees and services that will be presented to council in 2022. They were willing to pay for a 1% charge that was not represented in bylaw.
But they're not willing to pay for it in 2022.
Those works will have been realized in 2021 and paid for in 2021. So while that charge and the percent charge will form a factor for all other future works and services and all others in the development community, it was singular to the Royal Bay derivative for 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Dean, I think you're up.
I'll move the recommended motion there, your worship, that, Mr. Chair, that it be maintained for 2022.
We have a motion to maintain, engineer. Any discussion on that motion? Any in opposition? Motion is carried.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. That brings us to the end of tonight's agenda.
See y'all tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
Look at that.